Greetings, Mark Garang here, publisher of The Sun, and I'm here this morning with my good friend Mark Hounsell, former selectman, former planning board, former school board, pretty much everything.
County commissioner.
County commissioner, state senator, yeah.
Citizen.
And citizen first, though, right?
I've always felt that, I always taught this, that American is an action verb, and that we're all duty bound to pay attention to our government. Not necessarily run for office, but be involved, and so I have been.
Yeah, and we're not here to talk about the democracy, which would be another whole topic in another day. We are here to talk about Article 57.
Which is talking about democracy.
Which is talking about democracy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's the last article in the warrant this year. It's a petitioned article led by you. And it seeks to, I'm going to just put it in layman's terms, and then the first question is going to be, what inspired you to do it? But basically it calls for better coordination between the planning board and the selectmen, and puts in some pretty specific things that if there are projects on town properties that meet certain standards, they have to have public hearings and actually go before the voters.
Yeah.
Is that fairly stated?
I think that's very well said.
All right, so what inspired you to get into this one?
Reluctance. I was reluctant to have to, following the recent actions or inactions by the Board of Selectmen over the issues of public lands in the process. I'm a process person. I think that, you know, for us to survive and to continue, we have to embrace change, but we don't have to embrace every change. We have to work through the change, talk through the change. And so it's really important that we do that. And what I have found is the selectmen aren't doing that. And I am really, truly surprised, given what they said just as recently as this last fall. Carl Thibodeau and Steve Porter both called for a warrant article, and Carl said if there's a petition one, they would support it. Paul D. said to the Planning Commission that the Conservation Commission that the selectmen voted unanimously to provide a warrant article on the rec page.
Okay, so I was just going to interrupt and say, you're talking about a warrant article. You're specifically talking about a warrant article on the rec path.
No, I am not. And see, that's what people are doing. It will affect the process by which the rec path is disposed of, whether it passes or not. If we go through a process such as laid out here and the voters say, yeah, we want it, then we have it. But what we're doing now is we're not including the voters. We're not following the master plan. We're not looking at the collaboration that's required from a town our size. Last year, you and I led a charge for a charter commission. I actually thought we had become a city and that we ought to incorporate that. When a town gets to be too big, it's hard for everyone to understand each other. A smaller town like Eaton or Albany, they can operate because they're close to each other. There's fewer people, but when you get like we are, and as the master plan speaks, we have to collaborate. We have to be inclusive in the process. We have an elected planning board, and that master plan that we have really directs us to have the selectmen work with the planning board on development, and they're not doing it.
Okay, so one thing,
and they're flip-flopping back and forth.
I can't resist commenting on your thing about we led the charge on Charter Commission. You were eventually against the Charter Commission.
No, I was against what they came up with. Well, I was one of the petitioners. I lost faith in them in their first week.
Okay, I'm not going to go there because part of it was the 7 councils. That's another whole half hour.
Yeah.
But the idea that, but after all, you're a process guy. I appreciate that. But why this year for this article? So it is clearly, in my view, or not my view, but other people think it's clearly driven by the rec path. And you're saying no, then why would, if it's not the rec path, why are you presenting this year?
All right, so here you go. Here you go. It is not driven by the rec path. The petition is not driven by
What's
the
it
rec
driven
path.
by?
It is driven by the desires of the 60 people who signed them. And Mark, not one of them came from Kearsarge, not one of them from Innervale, most of them from Conway. And they got together, 60 of them, no elected officials. This became a people's article. Their reason is they want to be included in the process. And they're not.
We have public meetings all the time.
No, you've never had a meeting. They talk about having meetings. There's never been a joint meeting, a combined meeting, or a attentive meeting between the selectmen and the planning board on the rec path. There has not been one. What there has been is the selectmen flip-flopping back and forth, saying one thing, doing another. And I think I know what why they do that.
Yeah, but Mark, I can't speak for Steve Porter, I can't speak for Paul D, I can't speak for John Eastman. They were all here last week saying the exact opposite.
Well, they're wrong.
Steve Porter, the selectman's rep to the planning board, and Ben Colpath, the chair of the planning board, sitting here next to each other saying they work well together.
I watched that, and my goodness gracious, it's kind of comical. Carl Thibodeau says they work together when it's needed, but yet they kicked out the planning board's subcommittee report. This is what has happened. And I'm going to look at the voters. Voters, listen, this is what has happened. In the last 10 years, the Board of Selectmen operate as a dynasty. There has not been any change to the Board of Selectmen other than Ryan Shepherd, who provided a little bit of grit going against the grain. Back in the day, we had debates on the Board of Selectmen with Karen Unberger, Larry Martin, Dave Weathers, Jack Cuddy, Mike Valderas, Crow Dickinson. We haven't had a board who has debated since Stacy Sands left. They do everything unanimous, or maybe once in a while 4-1 or 3-2, so they all know what works for them, so they don't have any reason to hold a discussion in public. So a lot of the things that we're confused about is because the selectmen haven't not only worked with the planning board, they haven't worked with the people. Now, Mark, they're all wonderful people. They're friends of mine. I think very highly of every member of the planning board, every member of the Board of Selectmen. And I really think that Ben Colbath, once he understands process better, will get it. But Steve Porter is a disappointment to me because he said we're misguiding people. We're not misguiding people, we're guiding people because the selectmen aren't.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you.
They have a fear of loss of power. I got all kinds of stuff I could go over.
While you're thinking about that, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So the rec path clearly is part of it, right? What's wrong with the rec path? What's wrong with it? I mean, this has gone through, it's part of the master plan.
It isn't the same.
It was voted on in 2015. There's been meetings, and there's been vocal minorities at these meetings, but by all counts, Mark, this has been due process to get this to where it is now.
No, it hasn't, Mark.
But what's wrong with the rec path?
So the rec path that was voted on in 2015 is not the same thing that's being proposed now. It was going through the Bancroft property. And
but what's wrong with the rec path? I mean, just...
I don't know, because we can't get our answers.
I can't believe that, I talked to your brother Bill.
Oh, the pavement's one thing.
Yeah,
that's
the
wrong.
pavement. I mean, I talked to your brother Bill after the deliberative, and he's an expert hydrologist for sure, and the architect of the whole North Conway sewer plant. But this idea that is that the problem with this? That Peter Donahoe is not against the rec path, but the pavement in the rec path. Is that what you're against?
I'm against that, and I'm also very much against breaking the covenant restrictions. There's a moral argument here. Even Chris Myers mentioned it in 2015. He said, quote, from the planning board, Chris Myers says, Article 22 was amended to remove the words Whitaker Woods from the title. The amendment was made because the trail would not go through Whitaker Woods, but must remain wild, but rather the adjacent town-owned Bancroft property, which can be used for recreation process. Now get this, we do not want to offend the provisions of the deed. And yet, this is offending the provisions of the deed, or so it seems, but we can't get anything more than that from 10 years ago, and they...
I mean, Chubby...
Have you read?
It's not Chubby Whitaker doesn't have anything to do with the deed.
Oh my goodness gracious!
right? He didn't
It's
donate.
hard. It's hard to deal with the misinformation. That
He did
keeps
not
coming.
donate the land to the Conway. Chevy Waterco did not donate the land to Conway.
There's a deed restriction on the land, is there not?
Yeah, but there are deed restrictions. That's because the land was state money or federal money that bought it from Chubby. So it wasn't Chubby said we want to have this wild and natural. It was the deed restriction, but that's in all these deed restrictions for land that the state buys all the time. And is wild and natural include a mechanical groomer to go through it?
I was there when all that took place. I actually designed the building that at the Whitaker Homestead site. I was there when all of this was taking place. It was very well understood that it was going to be wild and natural.
Is a mechanical snow groomer considered wild and natural?
It's a tool that's used to groom the trails so that people can recreate on it.
I don't know.
I don't think that that's a lot different than putting 800,000 tons of asphalt to a wetlands. That's a lot different. So it's not the same thing. You're
Well, what about the common? Let's give it on a conceptual level. What about the common good, right? So there is a 1,500 feet of path asphalt that people don't like. Granted, it certainly disrupts the Whitaker Woods more than it is now. But what about the common good of people now can actually use the path? I mean, we make these trade-offs all the time.
And on December 3rd, Cal Thibodeau stated he would like to have a warrant article that determined the fate of the wreck path. That's just about 6 months ago. Now they're defending their desire to represent the few for the fewer. They fear the multitude. They don't, they're always talking about let the voters decide, but here they say, oh, no, we don't want the voters deciding. That might create red tape. Well, what it will create is yellow caution tape. We have to be slow and easy, or we could really break this town over this. There's a future for others. I'm in my future, but there's a future for others, our children and grandchildren. And we got to demonstrate to them that this can be done in a manner that's good for their interests. And we're not doing that with this.
All right, can we talk about the specifics of the article? Like one of the things it's not in the article itself, but you wrote a column a while ago, and it said you used the example of the paving by the Conway Elementary School
Sure.
is a reason why we
unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences,
right? They certainly, no one intended for the
right.
flood to have the devastation
right.
that it
The
had.
counter argument is that paved or not paved, we had a flood, one every 500-year flood.
We had two last year.
Well, I don't know about that, but
we did. In 24, we had two 100-year
100-year floods.
events.
Yeah, and I think Paul D said it was actually a 1 in 500 years, and I wondered how did they know that? But anyway, so
they didn't follow their own regs.
Okay, but the point is that you're saying that instead of doing what happened, which was and counter argument is that we got an engineer down there, we got Andrew Smith, Public Works Director, and if the town administration can't figure out how to put a little parking lot in, what good are they, for one thing?
We also have policies. The people who did the work, I have no problem with staff whatsoever. We're so fortunate.
Well, why don't you trust them to put a little parking lot in?
Because the selectmen didn't follow the process. This isn't staff, this is selectmen. The selectmen are responsible for maintaining federal standards so that we can have floodplain insurance program. That standard required that the selectmen get a variance from the ZBA before they approved the parking lot. They didn't do that. They didn't have any hearings, they didn't do anything. The church found out about it when they looked out the window and saw the construction equipment.
Okay, so the practical application of this, according to your article.
So the whole thing is there's an unintended consequence when you don't collaborate with people, when you don't include the ZBA, you don't include everyone else that should have a say on it. And they said they were going to put their own warrant article in. They didn't do it.
But the practical application of the one, again, going back to the pavement, the little asphalt parking lot, is that you would have voters, 1,500 or 1,800 voters turn out to decide whether we should have a parking lot by Conway L.
Yeah,
really?
absolutely.
How is the average voter going to know whether we should put a parking lot in?
When they have the hearing and when everyone talks about it in open and it's done in an open, transparent manner, then everyone will know what we're up against. But right now, the people at the church, they know what they're up against.
Okay, and it's specifically, now how'd you come up with these? And actually, I think I asked you this at the town deliberative. like this would apply to town-owned land,
Yeah.
but creation of paved area over 625 feet. That's like the footprint of a small house.
Yeah.
So if they want to do a little pavement down by the town garage, they're going to have a public hearings, and then the voters are going to have to decide on it.
We have to be very, very aware, and a lot of people still aren't, which surprises me, how fragile our drinking water is. And when you start increasing impervious soil to the point that's, you know, being done, you threaten that. We have a beautiful, one-of-a-kind aquifer, and you know.
Okay, so that's that, and then you have any removal of 5 or more living trees of 6 inches in diameter. So can't cut 6 trees on town property without the voters determining this. That's what I don't get.
So the chances of that having to be done are probably nil.
Then why have it?
Here's the thing about this. If the selectmen, this should be a selectmen's article. They should be doing their job and making things possible, and they didn't. So what this comes from is the subcommittee's report of the planning board to the selectmen that they have taken no action on. So this is action. The problem with a lot of things is that people want everything absolutely perfect before they move forward. It's harder to pass something than it is it's easier to defeat something than to pass it. But here's the thing. Perfection is the enemy of excellence. If there's some tweaks that need to be made, because after we pass this, we find out, well, you know, maybe we ought to do this as well. There's what's called the amendment. You can file an amendment. The selectmen can offer an amendment. They could actually even repeal it. But in the meantime, the people of Conway need something some method to understand what's going on.
Then why did you include? I mean, this is the counter argument to this. This looks like a carve out. It's like a carve out to try to get for political expediency. But you carve out the Kevin Lane Memorial Skate Park.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be included for review by the town.
No.
Because why?
Because there has been transparency on that, and there has been not excessive, but a lot of transparency, and everyone is in agreement with that. There's no need to have that.
I don't think everybody thinks there's an agreement of it. That's why they're looking for another site.
They got another site.
All right. So okay, we got 10 minutes to go. I'd like to talk to you about some totally other topics, just since you're here, but give a final closing statement about this. I've asked all my questions I can ask about Article 57.
Okay, so the statement here is about process and accountability. It's about transparency and collaboration. This article doesn't do anything to hurt anyone. It does a lot to help a lot of people. The people behind this are few. Not few. There's a lot of them. We've raised money. That Alliance is going to stay here whether this passes or not because we have objections. But we've had a lot of people donating $10, $20, and we've raised some money so that we could get our word out. There's a lot of people behind this. It's a grassroots support issue. It's grassroots. I don't know how it's going to turn out. But I do know this, it will make Conway a better place for our children and our grandchildren if we secure the trust of the voters, and the selectmen are running roughshod on that, and it saddens me to say that. I don't mean anyone any ill harm, but that's just the way it is with this issue. The people have a right to make decisions about their land, and this will give them that right. It will also allow people to put forward further arguments for or against a number of different things. But this is an important article. And in my opinion, it's probably one of the most important in the last 20 years.
All right, so who are you going to support? I guess it's in the selectmen's race, Peter Donahoe or Carl? I got to assume you're going to support Peter in this because he's supporting Article 57.
I'm supportive of changes in our government as they come. But there's no way that I am going to take a public position against Carl Thibodeau. Carl has done a lot of good in the time that he's been there. And if you have scales, you put the good, and then this one thing that's really quite bad does not equate to the same. No, I'm not.
Yeah, but
I'm not involved with that at all.
But voting is a binary decision. Who are you going to vote for?
Well, who I vote for will be my business, but I'm not publicly supporting, endorsing anyway, and I'm certainly not going to go against Carl Thibodeau. I grew up with him, and he's kin. I'm not going to do that.
He's kin?
Kin.
Kin?
Yeah, he's my cousin. He's my
hey, everybody's your cousin.
No, you aren't, but
Well,
you
that's
can
true.
be. But I'm serious. You know, there's a lot going on in this town, a lot of changes.
How is he your cousin?
His great-grandmother was a sister to my great-grandmother. We're both descendant from William Harrison Hobbs of Tamworth.
Oh, okay. We won't even go there. That sounds like a whole genealogical
Oh, it's fun.
mess, right?
There's a lot of, I'm not going up
All
against.
right. So what
Ken.
about you're on the school board,
I was.
and you went to Kennett High School.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the budget? What advice do you, let me put it this way, what advice do you have for voters who, everybody supports the school, right? Everybody wants the best education, blah, blah, blah. But there is a point where, and Bill Marvel makes this case all the time, is that we only can afford too much. What's your philosophy on that, the balance between what we can afford and what we should provide to our students in this particular budget? And the only way voters can really exercise that decision is to vote for the default budget, which is $600,000 less than the school budget and some of the special articles. How do we balance the need and the want?
Well, I want to begin it by saying elections have consequences, and this last year with the school board was pretty sad to behold. They lost within 1 year credibility with the voters, something that the selectmen
And why is that? Because of the school naming issue?
They didn't include, they made all those people wait. Yeah, they're over that, but they just, I don't know. It's just something that I don't want to. It's easy to be critical.
It is.
Let me be positive about something. This special ed thing is really, that's worth looking into.
Okay, that's a good idea.
There really is. We have opportunity there, not just for Conway, but for every school district north of us, because they all have the same pain of out of district placements.
Okay.
If we can have a facility that can service other people.
It is a good idea, and that was Mike DeGregorio's idea.
Yeah.
But what about this idea of going back to it? How did people look to you as a town father, even though you're not elected anymore, but you really are. You carry a lot of weight in this community. How does a voter approach the school budget? I mean, if you're sitting in you go into the ballot box, you get to say default budget or not budget. How do you balance? How do you recommend voters approach that? The balance between the wants, what the school board wants, and what we can afford to do.
I think that what we have to do when it comes to the school budget is kind of widen our tent, if you will, our panoramic view, and understand that the school board is only able to do a few things. And if they cut the budget, those few things would be co-curricular or bus routes or something. They don't have a whole lot of say of what they can do, and the big driver is special education. That's why I think DeGregorio's
What about moving one of the special articles that has attracted some attention?
No, I don't think we should be doing that, no.
And that's because it's not worth it or too expensive?
It's all of that. It's not necessary. There's other things that can be done. It may increase efficiency for the staff in the school, it may, and I would suspect that's probably the driver. But it does come down to affordability, and you are absolutely right. We have hit saturation point.
Saturation point with
budgets. And spending and taxes, and we don't know what Concord's doing. They don't know what Concord's
Would you recommend voters support the default budget instead of the school budget, school board budget?
I really don't want to chime in on what voters should do on that. What I think voters should do is demand transparency and efficiencies and proper considerations when they come to a meeting. I think the last school board was actually rude to people, and they may end up feeling the pain of that, and that pain may be the default budget.
Okay, and then this changing the school names back, the same approach where you're saying that, hey, the selectmen didn't follow the procedures for the rec path, even though they say they did with public hearings. The school administration is saying, hey, we followed the procedure. We had public meetings to change the names. Nobody showed up, and all of a sudden, a bunch of people show up after it's done and complain. Unfair. So do you think the school board should listen to all the people? My question is, you think the school board should have listened to the 100 people that showed up at the school board meeting after the decision was made to change the names, when there was a process to get to that point?
I hope the school board learned that good government, slow government. They rushed so quick to do it because they had to do it. And they tied, oh, well, we have to have this settled before we can open in the fall, so we got to do it now. They didn't have to do it now. They could have gone into the season, and then they could have been more inclusive of the public sentiment. They didn't do that. They weren't transparent. They weren't inclusive. And they're feeling the pain of that in this election. So again, my whole purpose with Article 57 is for transparency and integrity, and keeping the trust of the voters so solid that these boards know who they represent and that they're happy to do it.
You think we should change the names back now to the elementary schools and the intermediate school?
I think there's a fairly good argument on why we should, and there's a really good argument on why we shouldn't. So that comes down to people making their own decisions. My father and with Chet Lucy were the chairman of the boards that got John Full and Conway L. built on the building committee. I was in the second class that went into Conway L. And so I went through that whole thing, and you do kind of have a sense of history. And, you know, so I think that history is important, and I think the manner by which this took place, which is really a reflection of a change that was made, a pretty drastic change of closing the school, which I still don't think we had to do. I think that was the mistake, closing the school and then moving people around and then renaming them, getting everyone all ticked off. You could have gone a lot different approach. But I've always been about neighborhood schools, you know, where people could build the community. Conway Village is gone. There's no Conway Village to speak of. It's a pass-through town. There's nothing going on.
I think a good argument we made is coming back.
To what, a casino?
Well, there was the casino, but
Yeah,
that's not right in Conway Village. But Conway Village itself, the church, you got the, you know, there's a lot going on down there. Again, the road is going to be rebuilt next year, right?
So I would say what we have in Conway Village that is historic, and the way that a lot of us of the generation that wants the name change back is the Grindle building, the Salyards, which used to be St. Charles, the Brown Church, the White Church, the Town Hall, but that used to be a nice brick building with Caldwell County Trust. And then you've got you've got Carl Thibodeau's strip, you've got a couple of stores, you've got the casino, and then you're out of town. No, there's nothing in Conway Village.
I don't know. I think that I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there. We got the new bistro with the old gas station. It's a lot more attractive than
but back in the day, that used to be the annex in Mrs. Abbott's house.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny about
So what my point is this, is people really don't like change, especially as they get older. And they're the largest voting bloc is the elderly, the senior citizens. And you know, we're all going to go away, and the next ones are going to come in. It's like a conveyor belt. The one thing I am happy about is the young people and the newer participants in our government. It is a volunteer process, and it's very easy to be critical. But I would, you know, I was encouraged by the activity of the budget committee this past year. I see there's a lot of new faces running for the school board.
It seems like the budget committee is changing, though. The makeup of it is now you're getting people. I mean, people in a budget committee typically were the old curmudgeons who wanted to cut the budget, right? That's why you're there.
Yeah.
But it seems like now you're getting people on the budget committee who are
budgeteers.
Who are, well, budgeteers, but they're pro school budget. And that's a procedural question, and we only have 2 minutes to go. I won't even go there. But it is interesting. We should do a half hour on layers of history in Conway.
Anytime,
because you know there was a discussion about whether they were going to close the covered bridge over the down in Conway Village to pedestrian traffic only, which isn't going to happen. We were talking about upstairs in the newsroom, and Margaret, who's our editor, has been here for 10 years. Oh yeah, that's where Jonathan's was, Jonathan Seafood. Well, that's been gone for years, right?
Yeah.
And then someone said, wait a minute, that was the site of Slicks.
Yeah.
You know, so it all depends on your perspective.
Well, before that it was Happy Harry's.
And Happy Harry's, that's right. I learned about that from Bill Marvel. Anyway, Mark, it's always a pleasure. We are out of town. And out of time that is, and if you get all your cousins to vote, Article 57 may pass.
Article 57 may pass and may not pass. I don't know. I give up on predicting it, results, but I will say this. Article 57 should pass.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Take care.
You want to do part 2 while I'm here? You